At your command!
Hoffin, roll out! Squad E, ready to engage. All right. Just remember your training. We can do this.
It's a bit surreal to realize that the original Valkyria Chronicles landed on the PlayStation 3 a decade ago. The game proved successful enough to warrant 2 sequels for the PlayStation Portable, one of which never released outside of Japan, an anime adaptation, and a spin-off RPG. Yet despite Sega's support for the franchise, fans never got the one thing they really wanted, a console follow-up to the original. After 10 long years, that wait is finally over, with the arrival of Valkyria Chronicles 4.
Out of my way! Right on.
It's best to get this out of the way first. It would probably be more accurate to call this Valkyria Chronicles 1.5. Though it borrows some elements from the more recent installments, the game is clearly a throwback to the original. It then builds upon that framework with a few new additions of its own.
All allies have been taken out!
Everything from the visuals to the menu designs to the core mechanics to the sound effects are virtually the same as Valkyria Chronicles. Yes, the sequels retained the same aesthetic and reused many assets as well, but after a 10-year gap between the 2 console releases, it's only natural to find the 2 very similar and wonder if Sega really changed much up this time around.
Now then, let's have a little fun!
The good news is that while Valkyria Chronicles 4 most certainly embraces its origins, it takes everything up several notches. This is a much more intricate game than before, with larger-scale battlefields, evolving objectives, a higher amount of enemy units in play in many of the missions, and the addition of a few new elements. There are many more moving pieces than anything seen before in the series, and that makes for some great strategic battles that can last upwards of an hour or more towards the latter half of the game.
Eliminate all Imperial hostiles. Let's stop their advance. Squad E, move out!
Though the game starts off with a brief tutorial chapter to ease you into its real-time strategy mechanics, Valkyria Chronicles 4 assumes you have some familiarity with it as it tosses you headfirst into increasingly more complex scenarios. For veterans, the game won't really pose too much of a challenge until the final few missions, but newcomers might be overwhelmed only a few chapters in. However, there is an easy difficulty setting you can switch to at any time if you simply want to enjoy the story.
Look at the form, the curves, the angles. This is a masterpiece, damn it!
One of the best aspects of Valkyria Chronicles that holds true in the sequel is the sense of accomplishment felt by overcoming incredible odds. Being cautious and progressing slowly through a new map is only prudent, but your performance is judged by your efficiency in battle. The fewer turns you take to achieve your goal, the better your rewards, which in turn are used to level up your squad members and develop new gear and parts for your tanks.
Don't worry. If you've got my back, I've got yours. Sound good, partner?
Sticking to the same squad might feel like the best option for progression, but there's incentive to play with as many different characters as possible. By doing so, you'll eventually unlock optional side stories that offer more insight into the backgrounds of your companions. They are all worth playing through, not just for revealing more about each character, but also for the new traits characters will receive upon completing these stories. What once was a negative trait will flip into a positive one and essentially power up your members as a reward.
War changes everything. Piece by piece. Yeah.
Another element that doesn't seem to have changed much is the enemy AI. Arguably one of the weakest components of the original game, the developers haven't done much to remedy the issue. It's still way too easy to take advantage of the occasionally incompetent enemy AI, and often during enemy turns, the actions they take can be very generous and forgiving.
Let's all get a drink after this.
During some of the later missions, the more advanced enemies provide more of a challenge, and the game will punish you more harshly for bad decisions, but it's curious why Sega didn't include a harder difficulty setting to provide more challenge for veterans.
Soldiers after all!
Another returning issue, though minor, is the handling of tank units. The standard tank unit, as well as the new APC vehicle, can easily get tangled up on corners and edges of surfaces. It's frustrating when this happens as you have to waste your AP meter, the gauge that determines how far you can move during a unit's turn, to correct your path, which can potentially put you in a tight spot.
What follows here is a record of those brave warriors.
Even after all this time, the notebook presentation for the game still holds so much charm and personality. Valkyria Chronicles 4's canvas engine still looks amazing, and while it's not a giant step up from its predecessor, there's clearly more detail in everything from the environments to the character models. Much of the soundtrack contains holdovers from previous installments, but hearing them again after so long feels great, and many of the new additions from returning composer Sakamoto are just as strong.
There! next?
Pretty good.
All I could do was watch my friends die, one by one.
The story is a unique case. Valkyria Chronicles 4 takes its focus off the small nation of Gallia, the setting for the previous games, and takes a look at the rest of the fictional continent of Europa during their version of World War II. The narrative can get really heavy at times, diving into rather dark and serious topics that are handled fairly well, with some really emotional moments.
That's the old man from the parts shop.
However, this game, like its predecessors, embraces several anime tropes in an effort to balance things out with a more lighthearted nature. Though this alone can be a turnoff, the problem is that it sometimes takes it too far. There are a handful of very questionable scenes and lines of dialogue that will definitely rub some people the wrong way. Yet one of the game's central themes is redemption, and it's definitely worth seeing how these characters learn from their mistakes and change for the better over the course of the story. With the story taking around 40 hours to complete, plus 10 to 20 hours of optional and post-game content, there's plenty to keep you occupied, and the chapter-based format allows you to easily play the game in small chunks over time and still feel a sense of accomplishment. There's also a strong incentive to go back and replay missions for better rankings that will more easily allow you to unlock extra features found in the post-game.
Don't let them spot you.
You let your guard down.
Valkyria Chronicles 4 isn't a huge evolution of the formula, but right now, it doesn't really need to be. If anything, this is exactly what the series needed, to go back to what made many of us fall in love with the original and ramp it up to 11. Yes, some of the kinks still aren't ironed out after all these years, and that's something that can't be overlooked. It's not as groundbreaking as the original, but even after a decade, Valkyria Chronicles shows it still has the magic.
Oh yeah! It's bacon time!
You certainly impressed someone in that last battle. HQ sent you something nice as a reward.
Easy Allies reviews are made possible by generous viewers just like you. If you like what you see, check out patreon.com/easyallies to help us make more. For just $1 a month, you can gain access to weekly updates, spoiler discussions, and exclusive shows.
Kill confirmed. Not bad out there.